Coverage with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham and Jerry Carter. It's Thursday. I've got a schedule issue this week. Got some soccer to broadcast tomorrow, some football Saturday night in Pittsburgh. So Jerry and I are getting together a day early, and because we have a big sports weekend. It's Labor Day weekend, so a lot going on, a lot in the sports world. And Jerry, how are things looking from the other side of our continent here in the northern hemisphere?
Well, it's a busy day here in regards to the sports book as they're trying to get everything ready for the upcoming weekend. Number of point lines bouncing back and forth a little bit. It's just Vegas' way of saying, hey, it's real now. We're ready to start playing games. And I'm looking forward to, I guess, my first question right off the bat, whether it's ACC Network broadcast or finding another way to watch it. Chris, we've got our defending national champs taking the field tonight against Georgia Tech. My first question for you is, what does Georgia Tech have to do tonight to consider this game a success?
They need to be able to leave the stadium in the bus all in one piece or as close to one piece as possible. This is a game where you don't want to have to play Clemson in the first game of a season, no matter how well-heeled you are, how ready for that you may be. But Georgia Tech is just not going to be ready, and it's nothing on that program, nothing on Jeff Collins, the new coach. But the next couple of years are going to be transition years for Georgia Tech football. Paul Johnson, the longtime head coach there, he had a triple option attack, and he called the plays himself. He was the offensive coordinator, play caller, everything. And everything about running a triple option is so different than anything else you do in football that you recruit quarterbacks who have different skill sets than everybody else uses. You recruit linemen who are smaller and faster. They have to be able to run around the edge and cut block. And your receivers, they have to be able to catch the ball, but you value just as much or more their ability to block, and block behind plays. And your running backs are even different. They don't have to worry about, protecting the quarterback because you may throw the ball one or two times a game. And so everything offensively is different, and you can't turn that around in one off season. You can't just make your really good option quarterback into a drop back passer. You can't turn your receivers into spread offense receivers. So Georgia Tech's going to struggle all year long. Now, the later you catch them, the more, they'll have game planned, they'll have gone through the wars, et cetera, but they have not played a game yet with this new coach. They've gone through spring, they've gone through summer, but they've not played at all. So, no expectations. Whatever they do tonight is going to be fine, and it's not going to be fine. This Clemson team, it's hard to figure this, but Clemson, two-time national champions in the last 5 years, and this is the first time they've been preseason number one. So, so there's higher expectations for Clemson, and it's hard to imagine there could be. So, yeah, Georgia Tech. I will now. I've been told by the wife that as much as I've been hemming and hawing about this, you can do a free 1-week trial on YouTube TV, and so she wants to watch the Virginia Pitt game and also the Virginia Tech Boston College games when I'm on the road on Saturday. So she said, you might as well go ahead and do that today because then you can watch a game and stop complaining about it. You have a week of ACC Network before the cable company comes out and changes things over. So I'll watch the game tonight. I may be in the minority there, but I will watch the game tonight.
Yeah, I'm actually looking forward to heading across the street and watching it on one of the numerous large televisions. And Chris, we talked a little bit about Trevor Lawrence, and in my mind, and I don't think we're going to find it out tonight, but we're going to find out what it's like for teams to prepare for him now that they know who he is, now that they know what he's capable of. As far as somebody sneaking onto a football field, I felt like last year Trevor Lawrence had the benefit of, okay, we know this kid, we know he has a strong arm, we know he has long hair, we know he has kind of a laid back attitude, but we don't know how good he's going to be. And it's really hard. If you look back at some of the hits and misses on the next high school quarterback who's a can't miss, and we've seen some of them sadly miss in a widescreen manner. So I'm going to be anxious to see Trevor Lawrence is starting the year. It's his team. That wasn't the case last year. He is at worst the number 2 choice on most people's Heisman Trophy list. So it's going to be interesting to see how he handles that going forward. And I read an article this week where they're talking about, well, Clemson did lose 7 defensive starters to the NFL, or something along those lines. And I was sitting there, and it's the difference, Chris, in my mind, that separates a Clemson and an Alabama from the rest of the country. In that, when you have, 7 guys go to the NFL, you've got 7 guys that are equally talented or very close to it, ready to step into place. So it's going to be interesting for me for where Clemson's concerned. I don't expect it to be a competitive game, but I'll be curious as to how much Lawrence plays and how effective he'll be this season as a whole. Just, again, different level of expectations. I think it's a similar, different level of expectations as Bryce is going to have at UVA. I think people came into last year knowing about the young man, but I don't think people came in there thinking this guy has a chance to be the ACC Offensive Player of the Year. I think the level of expectations while they're different for Lawrence, I also think that for Bryce Perkins, it's a different set of expectations, and it'll be very interesting to see how they play out in the next couple of days.
Yeah, you talked about Trevor Lawrence being at worst number 2 on a lot of people's Heisman list. Unfortunately for him, he's only the second best quarterback in the ACC. But that said, you brought up a good point, and I'll go first with the thinking about Trevor Lawrence being a sophomore now. One could also say, well, yeah, okay, but he played 11 or 12 games last year. You had plenty of after the first couple, you could game plan around that and say, okay, this is what Trevor Lawrence does differently than Kelly Bryant, so here's how Clemson is now with Trevor Lawrence. But, one thing that's done in football has a long off season. NFL and college both have long off seasons. And what the coaching staffs do, in college football, we all put our attention on spring football. There's roughly a month where they're practicing every other day, and that's where we think, and then I guess we assume that the coaches just kind of go in hibernation the rest of the time and don't do anything until summer training camp starts, and that's not at all the case. What coaches do all off-season long, from January 1st or whenever that might be, for Clemson it's a little bit later than that, obviously, because they play into the playoffs, but, say January 15th on, is they and they're all studying film. They're studying film of themselves, but they're studying film of their opponents. And then after they study the film, they come up with tendencies. They come up with game plan ideas and things like that. And then when they get to game plan week for that specific opponent, they then take everything they've compressed from their months of film study and talking about it and hashing it out with other coaches and scouts and everything else. And they say, okay, here's what we want to do against this team. So no one had the opportunity last year to have that kind of insight into Trevor Lawrence. You had your game week. That's all you had. And so now everybody's had an entire offseason to look at Trevor Lawrence. And so he's got to adjust as well. Now, presumably he'll get better. He's a year older. He's also had a chance to prepare as a starter for a year and plus an offseason. But, yeah, the defenses are out there. And so I say that to say this. I talked about Georgia Tech, and they're changing everything offensively. Everything from the way they tie their shoelaces on up is changing offensively. Their defense was pretty solid last year, and nothing changes defensively for Georgia Tech. And so, they were a top half defense in the ACC last year. And so if you're game planning, if you're Georgia Tech, if you're Jeff Collins, all right, he's going to from what I've read, he's going to a more spread type offense, and of course they have to fill in all the blanks there. And he's trying to sell it as, oh well, there's a lot of similarities between a spread offense and a triple option offense because gosh, you're spreading the field and you do this. He's selling us something there a little bit, but if I'm game planning for him, I'm trying to run the ball. Yeah, I might have 4 receivers on the field and 1 running back and a quarterback in the shotgun, but I'm gonna run the ball a lot because the more I run, the more the clock runs, the less incomplete passes, the more the clock runs, and to shorten the game as much as possible, and then hope you're pin them back, punt the ball, pin them back, don't turn the ball over, and see if you can shorten the game. And if you avoid mistakes, you're probably still going to lose. I mean, there's nobody out there, nobody where you are, Jerry, that's going to be putting money on Georgia Tech to win this game. But if you're game planning this one out, all right, let's just keep the score down. Let's keep ourselves in the game. And they can do that. And plus, yeah, this is the first time we'll see Trevor Lawrence, like you were saying, Jerry. He's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's the quarterback of the number 1 team in the country, defending national champions. Let's see how he lives up to that, too.
Well, it's going to be interesting, Chris, as we're talking about that you could take the Clemson-Georgia Tech breakdown and apply it to, my Dukies played Alabama. You're in a situation to where one of the things that gets talked about, or in my mind doesn't get talked about the way that it should, was a move that the NCAA made a few years back, limiting the number of scholarships the D1 teams could offer, the number of people that could be there on scholarship, and it took its toll on a lot of powerhouses. The 2 that stick out the most, now one of them has bounced back better than the other, but all of the years of the success that Oklahoma and Nebraska had during their heyday, it's because the 8th best offensive lineman in the state of Nebraska is still going to Nebraska. You're just in a situation where the amount of talent that you could stockpile was insane. Because if somebody who was just trying to get an education and play some more football, and you give them a choice of going to Kent State and playing football, or getting his degree from Nebraska and being on the bench, those people were going to choose to go to Nebraska and Oklahoma. And it's a situation now where when they trimmed that number, the goal was to level the playing field. And they've done that now. It leveled it to the point, now you have a rebirth of it. Now you're in a situation to where Alabama and Clemson are in a situation of to where that they now have rebuilt monster programs. And so the big story today on the Alabama-Duke game is Alabama is going to be playing 2 freshmen at the linebacker position. One of their guys had tore his ACL this week. Yeah. So now they're trying to have a story that makes it look like that's going to alter the game. And I'm sitting here in my mind, that might alter the game with a single player. Let's say for UVA, if the other Bryce can't play a game, I could see that having a large effect on the game. At Alabama, Chris, they're just going to go get the next 2 5-star guys that are sitting on the bench ready to play. I still think that's the big difference in these schools that have that level of talent. And that comes years of watching, Duke play football up close. There was how many times was there a game where Duke could play with somebody for 3 quarters? And then in the 4th quarter, when Duke's starting to wear down, all of the other schools just get to put in the next group of fresh legs, the next group of defensive players. You're just in a situation to where Clemson is concerned, yes, they lost a ton of talent. I promise you, they replaced a ton of talent with a ton of talent. There's not a doubt in my mind that now, so they're on the upswing. You and I could go back as recently, Chris, as, I don't know, we say 8 or 9 years. And the question was Clemson ever going to be relevant in football again? Was it just going to be Danny Ford and the one and done, if you will? So what Dabo has done Correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think Clemson was considered a football power before this latest run. I think they were a school that had managed one national championship, but now you're in a situation to where I don't know that you can have a conversation about college football and not have Clemson in the mix on that conversation. That's the best program out there.
Well, in Alabama before Nick Saban, same place. They struggled for a long, long time between Gene Stallings and Nick Saban. So as much as we accept them now as the dominant powerhouses, there was a long period of time for both those schools. Clemson always thought of themselves as a powerhouse. The rest of the world might not have, but Clemson certainly did internally. You talk about the fact that Alabama can replace 2 starting linebackers with 2 5-star freshmen. The only thing I'd say about that, and this is not going to change the outcome of that game on Saturday, but it could make it a little more interesting for a little bit of time. If I had to choose on the defensive side of the ball, if you're going to tell me I got to lose 1 or 2 of my starters, I would probably choose linemen. Because, no offense to the different positions and the level of, intricacies they have, but for the most part, linemen, your guys in the interior hold their ground, and the guys on the edges either hold the edges or try to rush the quarterback. There's not a lot of thinking there. The linebackers are the quarterbacks of the defense. And so it depends on, what they have left. I don't know Alabama's personnel groupings well enough to be able to say with authority, but if one of those 2 guys is going to be responsible for also calling the signals and put everybody else in place, you'll often see it when you watch the game closely. You'll see the linebackers will shift the linemen in front of them. They'll shift them to cover a certain gap, change from one gap to the other or one technique to the other. The linebackers are coaching those guys on the field as the plays getting ready to happen, as the snaps getting ready to happen. And so, you got freshmen back there doing it. I don't think there's any question that Alabama and Clemson and Oklahoma and people like that are going to have the athletes out there to be able to run across the field and make the plays. But there is a thinking part of this game that's really important. And, those guys are going to have to learn on the fly. They've been through camp, presumably at least through summer camp, and maybe a lot of guys now are who are freshmen have either redshirted or came in early and went through spring, so they know the playbook. But it's one thing to know the playbook; it's another thing to have gone through it and walkthroughs and in practice situations. And now there's a live football game, so the first quarter or 2 may be a little awkward for Alabama defensively. So Duke might have a chance to pounce a little bit before reality sinks in later on.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I'll be happy to acknowledge I'm gonna watch it from opening kick to the final gun, regardless of the outcome, because it's a fun watch.
Well, you're a masochist when it comes to Duke football, but hey, it's Duke Alabama, so yeah, you might as well enjoy as much as you can.
And it's going to be interesting because that was probably one of the regrets from a few years ago when I was still on the East Coast. Alabama actually came to Wallace Wade and played a game, and something came up that kept me from getting to go down to Durham and watch the game. And I was thinking, I said, I could have seen Alabama in its prime. Well, who knew that Alabama maybe still just be hitting their prime? It's going to be interesting. I definitely think you're going to have the better, the more competitive football game. And I'm excited that you're going to get to be there. And I know that you talked about it yesterday with Scott German. So instead of going over a ton of stuff in regards to that, the breakdown of that game, but tell me the one thing that UVA has to do to leave Pittsburgh with a win.
Let me think this through. The one thing, it might be hard to say one thing. Defensively, I think they have to bow up defensively. And as we talked yesterday, Scott and I talked yesterday, and as I've written a lot this week, this Pitt team is a team in transition. And, from a Virginia fan standpoint, if you have to catch Pitt sometime, catch them now. I would not want to play them in October or November like we've had to play them the last few years, because this team is young, especially on the offensive line. They've got their left tackle is making his first college appearance. Their right tackle is a grad transfer from Michigan, which Michigan recruits great, except this guy only played 5 games there. So, he's got pedigree, but how much did he play there? They've got one, and 2 other guys who had played different levels last year, made a start here and there, but effectively one starter back. Their starting center is back. So, and the strength of this Pitt team has been under Pat Narduzzi the last several years. It's been their running game. It's been the guys up front, and it's been their running backs. Well, not only are they replacing 4 of their 5 starting offensive linemen, they're replacing both of their 1,000-yard running backs, Darren Hall and Quadri Olison. So you got 2 new guys running the ball. One of the 2 guys listed on their depth chart as co-number ones, one of them has 1 college carry to his credit. The other had 32 last year. So the running game, it will eventually get going. If you commit yourself to it, and if you're Pitt and that's your culture, you will eventually be Pitt and do what you always do. But week 1, without a preseason game to, work some kinks out, etc., these guys are going to be trying to be cohesive for the first time under fire against a really good opponent. I'm sure they would rather start with Youngstown State or somebody like that than Virginia. And so Virginia's got an opportunity. If what beat them the last couple of years against Pitt was they just couldn't stop the run. The defensive line is deeper this year for Virginia. Bronco Mendenhall talked about it this week in his press conference. Last year we really only went in with probably 4, maybe 4.5 healthy defensive linemen early in the season. He's got 6 who will rotate. He plays a 3-4, so he's got 6 who will rotate in and out, and that's great. That's what you need. He's got experience, and including in that group a true freshman, Jawan Briggs, the best recruit of the top-rated recruit of the Bronco Mendenhall era, and he's starting as a true freshman. And so that says a lot about that young man. You've got experience back at linebacker. You've got arguably the nation's best cornerback. He's certainly one of the top 2 or 3 cornerbacks, even inarguably there, in Bryce Hall. And so defensively, I'm going to focus defensively because I think the offense will be fine. The line, has depth. You've got to replace Jordan Ellis at running back. I'm fine with what they have there talent-wise. Receiver, they got a lot of depth back there. You're missing Olamide Zaccheaus, but you've got a lot of guys who caught balls last year who could step up and take over there. And you got Bryce Perkins to feed the ball to everybody. But defensively, can Virginia establish early on that they're not going to let Pitt run through them like they have the past couple of years? That's going to be key. And if Virginia can establish in the first quarter, you're not going to run on us, and you make Pitt a passing team, it's going to be a long night for Pittsburgh.
It's going to be interesting because having watched a number of Pitt Duke games pretty closely over the years, I'll stand by the fact that last year that was the game that swung the season for both of the schools. In that Jones was just taking the team up and down the field, scoring on every possession. And if Duke made 1 tackle, if they could go back and watch the film of the second half, if they could have stopped 1 drive, they win the game. And they ended up losing it at the very end. I want to say the score was something like 52-49.
Something like that, yeah. I remember that.
Yeah, good old-fashioned shootout going, hey, we could just make 1 tackle. But the Pitt, for me, if somebody says Pitt, what do I think of? I've always believed they're a very physical team. And I feel they play physical, and that's what sets up the run game. And it's going to be interesting because the more I listen to you and read about the Who's, I'm thinking that this might be one of their more physical football teams in recent memory.
Yeah.
Teams that are going to be able to go toe-to-toe and trade punches, if you will.
Yeah, let me interject there. I think an important part of this, and this does not show up in recruiting rankings, but when Carla Williams was hired as the athletics director at UVA, she came most recently from Georgia, and the hire was historic in lots of ways. First African-American woman to be an athletics director in the ACC, but she wasn't hired because she's the first African-American woman to be the athletics director in the ACC. She knows what she's talking about. Her focus at Georgia was in the football part of things. Associate athletics directors often have responsibility for a few sports, and her football was under her purview. And so the first thing she did when she came in, and she was hired about a year after Bronco Mendenhall had been hired to be the head football coach. The first thing she did was she looked around and said, "This is what we have in terms of a strength and conditioning staff." And she said, "Here's what we had at Georgia." And the number was something like 2.5 times the number of actual bodies working in the department, strength and conditioning wise. We have to step up and improve our strength and conditioning staff, because that's what's going to make this team more athletic, more physical, stronger. And so you didn't see the results of that, maybe because it didn't start taking effect until the offseason before last season. And so going into last season, you looked at the roster and said, man, they've got nothing on the line. They lost a lot from the end of the Mike London era. Now, what are you going to do? Well, what they had been doing all along, from the time that Williams had put in place, hey, we're hiring all this strength and conditioning staff, they spent the entire winter, spring, summer getting stronger and faster, bigger, thicker, and you saw that last year. Those 2- and 3-star recruits played like 4- and 5-star recruits because they were treated like SEC athletes. And so now we're a year into that. And this Virginia team, and BYU teams under Bronco Mendenhall, Virginia played BYU twice towards the end of, as it turned out, the end of the Mendenhall era out at BYU and the end of the London era in Charlottesville. And the one thing you would say about those BYU teams, they were physical. Of course, we played them. He was the coach there for 11 years. We played them in years, I want to say it was 8 and 9 of his era there. So he was well established in the way he did things at BYU when we played them those 2 years, 2013 and 2014, I think it was. Boy, they would just pound you into the ground. They were physical. They played to the faint of the whistle. And so, yes, so when you ask me, Jerry, what does Virginia got to do? They've got to be the difference between the 2017 and 2018 UVA teams in terms of physicality was stark. I expect an even bigger jump between 2018 and 2019. And everything I'm hearing from training camp is telling me that's going to be the case.
But it's going to be what's that old matchup of strength on strength then, if we're talking about, two teams lining up. Again, it's troublesome to me, and again, we'll go back to the conversation you had with Scott yesterday, in regards to the ACC Network, because you can look up and down this week's games. This is the game. Yeah. It is the game. The concept of television is going to want a game, and they have a game that you have the defending conference division, we say it correctly, division champ playing against the favorite going in. It's a night game. It's a fun stadium to watch a game, and the fact that it's very questionable as to how many people are actually going to get to watch the game. And again, I enjoyed you two going back and forth on that last yesterday, and it was a situation where obviously Scott has had more experience with it as you're waiting to deal with it. But in listening to Scott, and again, I know you haven't watched it yet, is there anything that he said in regards, hint for your listening today, go back and listen to that one if you haven't already, is there anything he said, Chris, that surprised you as he was breaking down his early thoughts on the network?
Really, no. And I'll say it for this reason. I've read a lot. I think I mentioned on the podcast yesterday, The Athletic had a really nice in-depth story about the behind-the-scenes of the ACC Network. Several Virginia and North Carolina publications that I keep up with have also done their own, like kind of going to a school. There was a nice behind-the-scenes about Virginia Tech in the Roanoke Times, for example, and a couple of the Carolina schools allowed access to writers to do similar things there. Among the things we learned from those behind-the-scenes stories written by the various writers is that the schools themselves are responsible for an awful lot of the content and production of the content. The national level games, when Duke and Carolina tip it off in basketball 2 times this winter, for example, that'll still be it'll be ACC Network label, but it'll be an ESPN production. It'll be everything that ESPN gives and more. When Clemson and Florida State play football this year, this fall, same thing. But when Boston College plays Wake Forest, you're going to have students and people on site running those broadcasts. And so, a lot of time and attention and money has been put into building up the resources that are available. But, I can now use my experience. I was going to talk about this yesterday, and then we ended up changing the course of the conversation. The years I've worked with VMI, it's a very similar process as to what's happening at the various schools. All 14-plus Notre Dame schools have their own internal ways of doing these things. And ESPN gives them standards, but and I will say I know that the resources that the ACC schools are going to be a little more than what certainly VMI has at their disposal. But I've done, dating back to 2015, I've done 4 baseball seasons. This will be my 4th football and second soccer season, and I've probably done. I haven't counted it up, but it's between 120 and 125 broadcasts on ESPN3, ESPN Plus, with my work at VMI. And what happens is there is a person there who's the producer. There's a person who's the director. You've got camera people that, in the case of VMI, people who live in and around Lexington all the way up. In fact, we have some folks who drive down from Harrisonburg about an hour and a half away who work these games, running cameras, running the boards, doing graphics and things like that. But they're not full-time employees, whereas in ESPN production, those tend to be full-time employees. And so I'm not knocking the talent level of the people who come and do our productions or who will do the ACC Network productions who are in-house, but it's not their full-time job. They've got other jobs. They've got other things they got to do, and they're not there every game. And the talent that you hear. So you don't see those people. You see the picture. You assume somebody produced it. You assume that they just know what they're doing, and then you hear my voice or you hear someone's voice. I'm not full time, I'm me. I think I'm good at what I do, but I'm not full time. And so, whereas on an ESPN national production, you'll have Kirk Herbstreit and Fowler and all the rest of them. They sit down with Dabo. They sit down with Willie Taggart. They just sit down with Bronco or Pat Narduzzi, whoever. They have production meetings with the coaches. They get an hour with them, and they get to go over all the details, and here's what we're thinking. So they have the nuggets for the broadcast. I have game notes that I get emailed to me, and I study them on my own time. I don't have that access, so I don't have the richness of stories. And so that's what's different. It's not and the economics of it just don't work for ESPN to put that much effort into every single game they're going to broadcast on the ACC Network or the SEC Network or the Longhorn Network or what Fox does for the Big Ten Network, because you just can't. And so that's why, not having seen it yet, that's why it's different. Because you can't spend the money that we're used to seeing spent on SportsCenter with Scott Van Pelt, on those Duke Carolina quality broadcasts, on the Major League Baseball game of the week. It's just not there. And so now I can't wait to see it, because I'm pretty much convinced of the fact that it's going to look the way it does, because I've done these games for 5 years with VMI, and God love it, we all put our heart and soul into it, but we don't have the resources that the big boys in Bristol do.
So I guess trying to summarize what you're saying there is that the biggest difference, I still, Chris, go back to the thing about changing the three-point line, and where they're going to change it at D1 this year, but they're going to wait and change it at D2 and D3 a year later so they can afford the paint to repaint the line. It's not that the quality isn't what it should be or could be. Are you comparing apples to oranges? I'm picturing the sets you're talking about on game day and the various locations. Is it fair or unfair to try to take the ACC Network and compare it to what we're used to on ESPN?
Well, it's only fair in this sense. When you're able to eventually get the ACC Network, and anybody listening to this, when we're able to watch the ACC Network, we're going to pay $5 to $7 per month more on our cable bill or whatever bill you're paying to be able to access this. You're not going to get it for free. ESPN. That's what these That's why it's not currently on a number of these Dish Network, Comcast, Cox, etc. Because the negotiations are about the amount of money that the cable companies are going to give to ESPN per month per subscriber, and those companies then have to pass that cost on to us. So eventually, they're going to all make more money, and that's great for them. But now, so if you're paying for it, you kind of expect it to be the same. If it was free, then you get what you pay for, right? I mean, but you're paying more for this. And I said this yesterday, Jerry. You heard this on the podcast, and some of our listeners who listen to every podcast. I subscribe also to the WWE Network. I'm a wrestling fan, and so I was there probably the first day they rolled that out in 2014, and I pay $9.99 per month for that, and I expect a certain level of production. And WWE, and we've talked about the XFL, and the same people will be doing the XFL has put on the WWE programming. One thing you can't say about WWE is that they don't know how to shoot a game. I mean, they are top of the line. They're better than ESPN. They may be the best company in sports right now in terms of producing a sports broadcast. But you pay for it, and you expect that. You're paying $5 to $7. You're going to pay $5 to $7 more per month for ESPN for ACC Network, and God love all of us who do this, because I'm not on the ACC Network, but I do ESPN3 and ESPN Plus broadcasts. I work hard at what I do. The people who run the cameras work hard at what they do, but there is a difference between a professional who works full-time for ESPN running the camera and a college kid not getting paid anything running a camera. There's a big difference there. There's a difference between a full-time ESPN director and producer calling the shots, making sure it's all running smoothly, versus someone who does this on the side. There's a big difference there, and so that's what I'm saying. That's why I think it's not apples to oranges. It should be apples to apples, but it's not, because it's just not being treated the same way internally.
It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out, because at least for me, I'll be paying a lot more attention to this one than when the other ones were rolled out.
Yeah.
I just wasn't chomping at the bit waiting, and then again, living 3,000 miles away or 2,800 miles away, it'll be interesting to see what the options are, out here for us. Hey, real quick, before we get off the ACC college football for the week, I want to make the note of the fact that the Boise State-Florida State game, they just announced that they're going to have to move it. That was one of those great cross-country matchups on a quote-unquote neutral field. They were going to be playing that game Saturday night in Jacksonville in the Jaguar Stadium, and now because of storm off the coast, they're actually going to switch that game just earlier in the day, and they're going to play it in Tallahassee at noon instead of under the lights in Jacksonville. And again, kudos for them getting ahead of it in reference to the pending storm. But how does that game change in your mind for Florida State and Boise State?
First, is it just me? I mean, it seems like this is 4 or 5 years at least now that we've had these issues pop up at this time of year. I don't remember before these last 4 or 5 years. And I'm saying I don't remember. I'm not saying it never happened. And so anybody out there who says, in 1998 this happened, you're wrong, Chris. But I don't remember major college football games being canceled every year until the last 3 or 4 or 5 years. 2 words for you there: climate change. And we can ignore it, and we are, and it's to our peril. As far as the game itself, yeah, it's a big difference. If I'm Boise State, I agreed to this game because I wanted to play on the neutral field. I didn't want to play in Doak Campbell Stadium. I didn't want to have to go to play a road game. Because that's different. I mean, yeah, it's still Jacksonville. It's still Florida. There'll still be a lot of Florida State fans there. I wonder how they'll accommodate now. The stadiums are similar size. I think the Florida State stadium is probably actually a little bigger, but how they'll fit the Boise State fans in, because I would imagine there probably were a good number of Boise State folks making the trip down to to take that game in. Just get some Florida sun and get back to Boise afterwards. It's a road game now for Boise State. That's a disadvantage. It starts earlier. That's a disadvantage. Is Boise 2 hours behind East Coast time? Is it Mountain time, Jerry?
Yes.
So so they're starting at noon. So that's 10 o'clock body time. I would imagine this is Thursday as we're talking. They probably flew out today or getting ready to fly out today. I would imagine if that'd be the case. So a 7 o'clock start is more favorable body time wise for me than 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock feeling to me body times, for a noon start in Tallahassee. So, yeah, there are some issues there. Florida State will be affected a little bit. You prepare all week. From at least a number of programs do. You prepare by changing your practice schedule a bit if it's a night game versus a morning game. So there'll be a little impact on both sides there. But but yes, they are getting ahead of it. To be honest, I had lost the fact that the game was scheduled to be in Jacksonville, and so when I heard that there was an issue with this game, I've been following the weather news, and I knew that this storm was churning off the East Coast, and I thought, man, is something else on the Gulf Coast because that issue there. You want people to be safe. You want the game to get in because we've had the schedule impacted adversely the last several years. Central Florida in 2 different years had games against ACC teams lost to hurricane issues. And I say ECU, UCF, and arguably that at least one of those years could have kept UCF out of the playoff picture because they're losing a game against a Power 5 school. So the long and short of it is, yes, impact on both sides, and we need to do something about climate change.
It's going to be interesting, Chris, because this will be a very unique sandwich, if you will, for Boise State, because not that many people will remember this, because I only do because I was in the stadium when it happened. So Boise State's last football game, which was the bowl game in Dallas, ended up making history by getting called in the first quarter. Yeah. And the storm that day, they could not complete it. So your fans that made that trip very much came up empty-handed, if you will. And I'm sitting here going now, so the next time that they play football, I think it's a huge difference from a standpoint of, again, I'm looking at it through the fans' eye. And the school, because, yes, the stadiums may be similar, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say there aren't the same number of hotel rooms in Tallahassee that there are in Jacksonville. So I'm going, okay, now we're talking about how early they have to play the game. If you're not fortunate enough to get a different hotel room, you're waking up that morning and you're driving from Jacksonville to Tallahassee.
Yeah, you're right.
And so again, that's the fan side of it. But I just wanted to throw that in there.
That's not a short drive either. Yeah.
Yeah, logistically it becomes a nightmare. But hey, outside of the ACC, this is still a college football one, and you can correct me if you can remember this from before. But we talked a lot about quarterbacks signing on with a college, and then when it doesn't work out, going to a different college. Well, this year, in my mind, the first time it's happened in history, that 3 different Power 5 football teams are going to be run by quarterbacks that were at the same school. You got, obviously, Fromm is still at Georgia. Eason has been named the starter at Washington. And Fields has been named the starter at Ohio State. Yeah. So you're in a situation I cannot remember of another time. Obviously, there's been plenty of times when it was 2. But what does that say about the state of the quarterback's position in college football?
It's very important. And, I know that there are quite a few people in the sports punditry world who like to inflame the discourse with their hot takes about how these millennials they lose a job and they just want to leave and run somewhere else. They've got 4 or you can say 5 years where they can play college football. 5 years if you have a redshirt year. You've got 5 years of your life. If you're lucky enough to live to your lifespan, you're going to be 85 years old. You got 5 years where you can play college football. Every year you spend of that 5 years holding a clipboard behind somebody else is a wasted year. You don't get that year back. You don't get a 6th year. You don't get a 7th year. You get 4 or 5. And so, if I'm going to Georgia and I go there and I think I'm going to compete for the starting job and I lose it, I can either stand on the sidelines and not develop it. And of course, a quarterback too who goes to a Georgia or goes to an Ohio State, or goes to one of those elite programs, they think when they're in high school that they are NFL quality. All they need is a little more seasoning, get some reps, get a chance to show themselves at college level. They're NFL guys. So you've got, you've got 4 or 5 years, and realistically, very few people start as true freshmen. So you maybe have 2 or 3 of those 4 or 5 years where you can really show what you can do to NFL teams and maybe make an impression and get a job in the NFL. And then you got to start all over again. Then you got to impress the NFL people and earn a job there, et cetera, et cetera. But so no, I'm all for it. I mean, it's for the betterment of the young men and female athletes too. You don't hear it about as much, but female athletes, if you decide to transfer, they should be able to. If I'm a student, if I'm an English major, and let's say I went to UVA because Rita Dove was the poet laureate of the nation when I was a student at UVA. And if I wanted to be a poet, and then Rita Dove gets hired by Harvard, I should be able to go to Harvard. I should be able to transfer to Harvard, and I would be able to. But when coaches leave jobs, you don't ever hear about, we ought to, not worry about the coaches. What about all these coaches leaving jobs? We always hear about the kids. So that's my thing. I'm glad for these guys that they are able to have that freedom, and I think it should be even more so. I think that the transfer rules should be relaxed even more to be beneficial to the student athletes, because that's who my concern is.
It's going to be interesting, Chris, because the other thing that happened, and again, I was obviously following the one at the University of Washington very closely.
Yes.
Ethan was from Lake Stevens. He was actually from the high school that my kids went to school. So when he went to Georgia, and his was an injury, he was the starting quarterback before he got hurt. So Ethan comes home, he sits out his year, pays his dues, and the young man that would have been the starting quarterback is now the story this week, when they said it came down to the wire. It was literally a game time decision, if you will, and they were planning on giving both quarterbacks playing time in game one. And it was a situation to where the young man that would have been the starter is now he's opted to leave. And I read the story this week. He's saying everything you just said. Because I get one chance. I get one chance to be a college football quarterback. I want to take full advantage of my opportunity. So Ethan leaving Georgia bumped somebody at UW. So now you're in a situation to where the young man leaving UW is talking about a possibility of going to Fresno State. Which in turn, it's kind of like the same thing when a coach gets hired or fired. There is a domino effect.
Yeah.
Other words, if the quarterback leaves, and goes someplace else, he's going to take a spot from somebody who was there, who's going to take a spot from somebody who was there. But I do believe they have the right to do it. I found it unique in the fact that you're going to look at, now there's 2 people that actually has UW making it back to the playoffs, which I think is a reach. But you've got 3 pretty prominent quarterbacks there that are all going to be playing for either a major bowl game or for a shot at the playoffs that all were part of Kirby Smart's program down there. Hey, a couple things I want to run by you real quick and get some takes from you, like we normally do in the off season. First thing I noticed, Chris, was what the New York Knicks have agreed to do is allow Carmelo Anthony to come participate in their scrimmages. Now, what is your take when you hear that?
Yeah, I have not seen that news yet. My initial impression is, all right, so we would like to see what you, Mr. Anthony, have to offer without committing to anything. Because, the Knicks have a lot of holes. I mean, outside of our R.J. Barrett, they have an entire roster of holes. And so, but that's that, without having to sign him to a contract that even the level of the Dwight Howard contract, which apparently is day to day from what we're reading, which is just interesting out there in Los Angeles. We're not committing to anything, Mr. Anthony, but if you have something to offer, we'd love to see what you have. And if not, you help us by giving us a warm body to wear a jersey while we're practicing. So I hope for Anthony's sake that it works out. I personally don't think he's done. And I think if he can show himself well enough in those situations, he might get a chance to make the roster. So I would root for him to do that.
And it's a perfect place for him to make the roster because his best days were playing in the Garden with the Knicks. So you actually kind of led into my next one. My next one was reading the details, and this is how bad that Dwight Howard, wants another chance. He left money on the table with the buyout to get out of Memphis. Those who weren't following at home, he went from Washington to Memphis, and now Memphis to the Lakers. Because the numbers, I apologize for not having the exact number, but it does read like a day-to-day contract for the tune of what I believe was $18,000 a game.
I'd heard 15, but I'll go with 18 too. 18 per game if he stays on the straight and narrow and doesn't cause discord within the locker room, which, oh my goodness, that tells you how toxic his reputation is. Because so talented that he can be, and we talked about too how the talent maybe doesn't translate. We talked about this on a podcast recently, how the talent maybe doesn't translate to today's NBA, but he still got it. And so, but hey, we want you to come in here, rebound, play position defense, block some shots, pass the ball, set some screens, and shut your mouth is basically the message here. And if you can do that, we'll pay you $18,000 a game. That's about. I mean, okay, the pay rate is great. But that's your toe is in the door, and it's about ready to get slammed, and your career's over if you have one slight misstep.
Yeah, it's interesting because those two stories side by side, and again, I don't consider myself a fan of either one of them. I don't dislike either one of them. If anything, I blame Carmelo Anthony for the popularity of the one and done. I think if Carmelo Anthony doesn't make it work, if he doesn't win Syracuse a national championship, because I can't even tell you who else was on that team. But I'm pulling for both of them. I just thought those were two really unique storylines where, because today being Thursday, they're saying, that he's going to join the scrimmages. And Dwight Howard, I got that same impression. If he does so much as says boo, they're gonna show him the door. And here's this next one. I probably would not have chose to notice this one if you and I hadn't spent a decent amount of time this summer talking about him. But I was sad to see, I can't say shocked, but sad to see how Boogie Cousins made news this week. I didn't know what your thoughts were when you were reading or listening to that.
Yeah, disappointed. For somebody that we've known to have issues with dealing with people in certain capacities, but they were, from what I never don't remember at least reading about issues of this nature. We're talking about domestic threats, I guess we could call them, towards a partner, and we knew a lot about his issues with teammates and front offices and things like that, but I pretty much have a zero tolerance policy on this. I grew up in a home that was pretty it was broken up by domestic issues between my parents and my father, and so I've got personally no tolerance for men who talk to women this way, and I'm not sure that as an employer, I mean, Augusta Free Press is an employer. I wouldn't want to have someone in my employ who, had this allegation against them, and I'm sure it's got to be adjudicated. I assume it's going to be adjudicated. And so, the NBA is an employer. The Lakers are an employer. Other NBA teams are employers. You can't tolerate that kind of. You shouldn't have tolerated it 10 years ago, 50 years ago, whenever. You certainly can't tolerate it now.
Yeah, it was that's what jumped off the page to me, because I've never liked the karma he brought to a team. But with all of the injuries, I'm going, okay, let's give him the benefit of the doubt. I don't know him personally. Maybe some of this is blown out of proportion. Maybe some of this is ego. But that one there, I'm with you 100%. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that all we're being told now is under review.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at some of the stuff with some of the football players.
Yeah.
How fast the NFL stepped in, how fast teams made the necessary moves. You've got a guy with the Lakers that's, I know, again, you're innocent till proven guilty, but you've got a guy with the Lakers that already isn't going to play.
I would say that by and large, though, in the NFL, now the Ray Rice example was a little different, but then the NFL hemmed and hawed on Ray Rice before he was finally jettisoned. The Kareem Hunt was handled in the aftermath of Ray Rice, but often when you see like a guy get a DUI or have a domestic charges placed against him and he's immediately released, it's because he's a backup linebacker who plays special teams. It's not because he's a star player. I don't want to give the NFL that much credit that if Tom Brady or someone of that stature were accused of some things of this nature, that they would be immediately cut. In fact, isn't Kareem Hunt on a roster right now? He got picked up by the Browns, so. And there was a bidding war for his services. He's got to sit out until his suspension's over. But Cousins, okay. Boogie Cousins, who scores 27 a game with 13 rebounds, he's not that Boogie Cousins anymore. So all of a sudden it's under review. I'm not sure if the 27-13 Boogie Cousins, if this even gets much of a review. So I'm cynical when I say that, but I think that might be a little bit of reality.
I don't have enough to make the argument in the other direction, so I'm going to agree with you on that. Again, because he's on the shelf for the next 9 months, I was thinking that the Lakers could have a move of, hey, we're going to suspend him with pay.
Yeah.
Just acknowledge the severity. And I'm not going to go into the details. You know them, I know them. But the severity of that, you just can't brush that. That's not like, hey, I don't like you, I'm going to, mess up your car.
Yeah.
But, hey, enough on that one. I got another one for you. It happened to do with the NBA and the Lakers as well. I got a kick out of Kobe Bryant this week saying I would have won 12 rings if Shaq had just worked out while he was my teammate.
Yeah, that's great. I love seeing that. And I'll say this. 12 might be stretching it, but they would have won more if Shaq had taken it serious. I don't disagree with Kobe at all. And Kobe is a guy that we've known all along, ultra competitive. He was compared early in his career. I don't think he ever lived up, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say he didn't live up to being the next Jordan, but he was close. And I think he was close. He was neck and neck in terms of his competitiveness, in terms of him and Jordan. He made himself better because because of his hatred for losing. And if you know anything about Shaq, Shaq when he came in the league, 7'1", 260 pounds, could run the floor. He could he could lead a fast break, dribble the ball down the court. By the time he was done, he was still 7'1". He was about 370. And he could barely move. And in between, he deteriorated. And he wouldn't – the Shaq that we knew in the 90s, he would be Dwight Howard now, honestly. And I'm saying that's my hot take of the week. He did not adapt over that the period of time he was in the NBA. If he had the want-to of a Jordan or a Kobe – he would have been Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell all rolled into one, but he didn't have it. He had the skill set. He had the physicality early in his career, but he also had a desire to have fun. He did all the rap albums and movies and ate a lot. And it's hard to argue. You got all this money, you got everything else, and he still performed at a very high level until maybe the last year and a half of his career. He performed at a high level. But what could he have been if he had the want to of Kobe Bryant? I think Kobe's right.
Yeah, it's interesting because you hit on the key word the same way Pitt equals physicality. No one's ever going to convince me that anybody alive is more competitive than Michael Jordan, but I would say that Kobe Bryant is 1A to his 1. And it's a situation to where where Shaq is concerned, I love Shaq. I just feel like that he's a good-natured person in a time where if he ever wanted to be mean, he could have been as mean or as evil as mean and evil can get.
Yeah.
So I always love the fact that I tell people listen to me, I say, yeah, I consider myself like Shaq. You don't get along with me, it's because you're not trying. You know, he was fun. He had an opinion. He enjoyed life, and you could see that Kobe was the complete opposite of that. And it was an enjoyable read, and I'll be looking forward to seeing Shaq's response to it because he's Shaq. He has to respond to it. A couple of quick note that made me smile this week. For the second straight year, the Big Three, which I have is the one level of professional basketball, if you will, I have not seen in person. For the second year in a row, a female was named their Coach of the Year. Last year, it was Nancy Lieberman, who goes all the way back to my days in Norfolk as playing for Old Dominion. This year, it's Lisa Leslie, who has led her team to the championship game, which is coming up. Because that's long been a discussion about whether or not men would let a woman coach them. Is this just a momentary feel-good story because of the age of these men, or does it send out hope that could change at one point?
It's going to change because we've seen several NBA teams hire women as assistants. And you're not going to be a head coach until you're an assistant somewhere. And so it will change. And that's how it will change. And then seeing Lisa Leslie and Nancy Lieberman-Klein, winning those awards at the Big Three level, that sport is interesting. I mean, the 3-on-3 is in the Olympics now. I just saw I didn't see which team, and there may be several teams. Joe Johnson has apparently reclaimed his career in that league. He's 38 years old, former All-Star with Utah and Atlanta and a couple other teams. He was a 27-point-a-game scorer for a couple of years at the height of his career. He's getting looks by NBA teams now. That sport, interestingly enough, I just thought when I first saw it, it's Ice Cube, it's a couple other guys, it's a sideshow. It's going to be a joke. You play 3-on-3 at the Y, the old guy league. When you don't want to rub down the floor, you still want to play basketball. That's 3-on-3. It's taken off now. But yeah, I think from the women's standpoint, you're going to see women head coaches eventually in the men's game because they're getting those assistants jobs, and that's that's where people find their next coach. And so somebody's going to hire the first one, and then it's not going to matter what sex you are. It's going to matter what you know and how you can organize your team and win basketball games.
It's kind of funny when Pop named Becky Harmon, and I remember I spent Becky Harmon's career watching her in the WNBA. Phenomenal talent, incredibly knowledgeable. When Pop hired her as an assistant for the Spurs, you feel, it's a PR move, and I'm going, I don't think anybody that thinks Pop is going to do a PR move knows Pop at all. It's a situation where now she actually coached the Spurs summer league team the year before last and had a great deal of success. And there's a lot of people who think it's a matter of time, and I was encouraged. I was encouraged by that. Hey, the next one I got for you, and I'm going to jokingly tell myself that Rory listens to our podcast. But you and I were talking a couple weeks ago about golf. We were talking about they're still heavily dependent on Tiger Woods. How are they going to fix the game? What adjustment are they going to make? They've shortened the season to a point of ridiculous. Roy came out this week, Chris, and offered up his solution, which I like. He's saying we need to space out our majors more like they do in tennis. What's your take on Roy's idea?
Yeah, he is listening to the podcast. No, it's a great idea. It makes no sense to compress it all into. I mean, we have the Masters in the first or second week of April. I think it's the second week because the first week's the NCAA Final Four, and then they've moved up the PGA into May. Then you have the U.S. Opens in June, and then the British Open, the Open, is in July, and then it's over. I mean, yeah, you still have your Tour Championship and all that, but nobody. The casual fan who barely pays attention to golf in the first place, if they're paying attention, they pay attention to the Masters because for most people, hey, it's spring now. Let's watch, southern Georgia or I guess North Georgia, and let's see the azaleas and let's ring in spring this way. For most people, that's when their season ends. I mean, they watch the Masters. That's it. If something happens, like this year, Tiger Woods wins the Masters, then you might watch the next couple just to see how Tiger might do. But yeah, the fact that the season's already over makes no sense. We talked about that last week, I think a couple times in the last couple weeks. It makes no sense. And so, there's plenty of good weather. There's the country's big. We have a big southern U.S. And southwest U.S. where the weather stays warm for most of the year. Golf is not a sport like baseball or football or one of the stick and ball sports, whatever, that is a daily grind. You can space your tournaments out and have it make sense. Having a silly season, as long as this silly season is going to be, is plain silly. And if I'm running golf right now, I'm wondering, are people going to remember in April of next year that golf even exists anymore, because that's going to be that long before anything meaningful happens in golf. So yeah, I love the idea. Space it out. You can keep interest all year long.
And I also applaud Roy for taking advantage, obviously, by winning the Tour Championship. He's the hot take and cashed the $15 million check. But he took the time to share his thoughts on the game, because the concept of $15 million for a week's work, it's kind of short-sighted, because they obviously work on their game year-round. They don't take the physical beating that the football players do. But golf right now, Roy could have easily cashed his check and say, hey, let's leave everything alone. Life's good. I've got $15 more million. But he's thinking about the long term of the game. And because I know that they're afraid of football, but are they that afraid? I mean, they're still playing golf. There's still golf tournaments. There's golf somewhere in the world. Basically 365 now.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure why they're willingly cutting off their season. And I feel like they keep doing it. It's now mid-August.
Yeah. You
You
can't just see. For me, I mean, I've worked in the events business with some of our marketing clients for several years, and of course, we did our own promotions business in the sport of wrestling. You can't worry about what other people are doing. Something is going on every day somewhere, close by, far away, whatever the case may be. You can't let your sport be defined by what someone else is doing. And so, football doesn't worry about that. Baseball doesn't worry about that. And if you want to be on the same plane, not everybody's a football fan. And I'm sure if it's a meaningful golf tournament, if it's the Greater Greensboro Open in October and there's Cowboys-Patriots on a Sunday, you might not watch the final round then. But, if you have the PGA Championship in against a football weekend, and there's compelling storylines, Rory and Phil and Tiger and Brooks are all on the leaderboard on Sunday, I have to choose now what I'm going to watch. And so no, you cannot cede territory to your potential rivals for eyeballs if that's the case, why have golf tournaments in general? And I'll say about Rory too. I agree that he could have just left well enough alone. But I'd say this: he's probably protecting his own interest here to a degree because a golf that isn't healthy is not going to keep writing $15 million checks to the winner of the Tour Championship. The sport's going to have to. I mean, NASCAR has had a huge downfall in the last 10 or 15 years. And you're seeing some issues there in terms of, race teams are disbanding or cutting back operations. They used to have competition for those 43 spots. They're not having 43 racers for every race anymore. And so, I've covered some races. Rod Mullins, who joins us on Podcast Weekly, covers races for us an awful lot. When you go to the tracks, they're blacking off the upper decks of tracks in a lot of places. I mean, so your sport can atrophy if you don't treat it right. And so Rory, he's probably saying, hey, I'd like to make $15 million next year, and in 10 years if I win the Tour Championship, I'd like to cash another $15 million check. But it's not going to happen if this sport deteriorates the way it is right now.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I feel like they're conceding before trying.
Yeah.
And that part's disappointing. Hey, another quick note. I was excited to see this because the WNBA is at a crucial crossroads. For the first time in my decade of following the league, they're on an upswing. Chris, they announced this week that the Players Union has formed a board of advocates with 14 members to try to help them through this. And a couple of names that you'll recognize, Alex English and Jerry Stackhouse, have agreed to be part of this. It's just, to me, it's the fact that they get the importance of this next contract. Remember when they were trying to get the G League to be the alternate plan for the one and done.
Yeah.
By saying, hey, if you go to the G League, we're going to pay you $125,000 to play in the G League. Chris, that number is higher than 90% of the players in the WNBA make.
Yeah.
The day they announced that they're all tweeting, hey, how do I get my tryout? How do I, so you're sitting here in a situation to where I'm glad that they're taking this serious and that they put a board together and they got a couple. I mean, Stackhouse is kind of busy right now. I'm glad that he's finding time to help out with this as well. So I thought that was pretty cool. The next one is a guy in your neighborhood. We have to say congratulations to Scherzer because he just joined Tom Terrific with 8 200 strikeout seasons. And instead of me trying to tell people about what he's meant his time with the Nats, I'll let you do that.
Yeah, boy, he's back. He's pitched twice now in the last. He's pitched his spot in the rotation the last 2 times. Boy, I'm trying to think. It's probably 2014 he joined the Nationals. He's won 2 Cy Young since coming to Washington. He had won 1 in Detroit before leaving as a free agent. When he first signed that contract, I want to say, and I don't have the numbers right in front of me, so I'm quoting from memory. 7 years, $217 million. At that time, $31 million a year was. I mean, it's a lot of money for the average person in general, but in baseball terms, that was a lot of money at that time. And I've seen analyses from, comparing his value from the wins above replacement standpoint. He's actually been underpaid based on $31 million a year. Doesn't come close, actually. It's within he's somewhere in the 60th percentile of what he could be getting paid. I grew up as a fan of the Atlanta Braves when I started watching them on Superstation TBS when they were bad, and then they got good, and they had 3 Hall of Famers come through, guys named Glavine, Maddox, and Smoltz. And then when Ryan Zimmerman got drafted, former UVA star, got drafted by the Nationals, I want to say it was in 2003 or 2000. I think it was 2004. He was the first prominent UVA player of the Ron O'Connor era to be drafted. He was drafted actually 4th in the first round. Played 6 weeks in the minors. He's been playing in Washington ever since. He got called up September of that year and never went back to the minor leagues. And he's still with Washington all these years later, 2019. So I became a Nats fan. We used to go up once a year. Now we go up more often a year just to watch Zimmerman. I'd be the idiot in the stands yelling, "Go Who's," whenever Zimmerman would hit. Well, 2012, that bad team for 7 or 8 years went to a playoff series and actually should have won that playoff series, didn't. 2014, they signed Scherzer. They add him to Strasburg, and they've been a great combination. So I've had the fortune to watch the Braves. I watched 160 games a year of the Braves when they had 3 Hall of Famers in Glavine, Maddox, and Smoltz. And I think I'm watching 2 of them now. Strasburg may be on the fringe, but Scherzer definitely. A fastball that he throws for 7 innings a night, 96 miles an hour. A slider that drops off the table, a curveball and a changeup. And he's got – I talked about Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan and their want to. He's a guy that's got want to. When the manager, Davey Martinez, comes out to the mound to take him out in the middle of an inning, say it's the 8th inning, and he's at 100 pitches, Scherzer tells him if it's time to take me out of the game. And I've seen it several times this year and several times over the last several years where the manager walks out to take the ball and walks back in the dugout without the ball. And so, and without having made a change, without having raised a right or left arm. He's a guy that you root for, and he's also damn good. So I've had the pleasure of watching him. It seems like when we plan our trips to D.C., you plan a trip to go see a couple games a year, a couple different times, and I'm watching for a week or 2 ahead of time. Because we'll watch, say, a Friday night game and a Saturday afternoon game. We'll try to catch a couple games at a time before we have to head back. Is it going to work out that I'm going to see Scherzer? And I've been very fortunate. I want to say the last 8 or 9 times we've been able to see Scherzer. And I am so lucky because he's a guy that, I've seen Maddox in person. I saw Maddox in person when I was I was on my high school academic challenge team, won the state championship. We competed in the national championships in Chicago. I saw Maddox pitch in Chicago on that trip. I've seen Maddox pitch. I saw him pitch in Atlanta. I saw Smoltz pitch. I saw Glavine pitch in person. I've seen Scherzer pitch a number of times in person. I've seen a lot of Hall of Fame pitching, and Scherzer is right there with those guys.
A couple thoughts to add to that. One, clarifying 8 straight with 200 is telling you stayed healthy. Your a certain amount of that is luck, but a lot of that comes down to preparation. The fact that he's been able to have 8 straight years, and that you've got to go all the way back to Tom Seaver as the last time somebody was able to do that. As far as the Braves go, now obviously Maddox will be my favorite baseball player of all time, and I was fortunate enough towards the middle to the end of his career to get to take a trip or 2 each year and see him pitch in different parks. And in reference to the Braves, didn't you kind of feel bad for Steve Avery?
Steve Avery and Kit Merker, too. They were both guys with a lot of talent.
Exactly. You're just kind of you hear the reference about the fifth Beatle, and I always thought those guys had a tough road there.
Brownie Nagel of that era, Brownie Nagel, Charlie Lee, they had pitchers around those guys that were top level guys, but they were 4th and 5th starters, and sometimes there was another guy, Pete. I can't think of Pete's last name now. They had guys who were spot starters who would have been number 2 or 3 guys for most teams. Those teams were loaded pitching wise.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Real quick, we talked about this last week or earlier this week, kind of at length. Just the Andrew Luck follow-ups, and kudos to Aaron Rodgers for saying this, because now I wasn't paying attention to the Colts game when the story broke. Okay, I was not aware that the story broke during the game to the point where he was booed off the field. Yeah. And I applaud Aaron Rodgers for saying, hey, what's that about? And now they got people wanting their season ticket deposits back. And so I just, that was, as much as we talked about it on Monday, that part of the story was hidden from me at the time. I didn't know what your thought process was there.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, and I didn't, explicitly, because I didn't know that you didn't know that. I would say that as I was making a point about how, boy, it wouldn't surprise me if Luck takes a year or 2 off, gets feeling better and says, you know what, I'm 30, 31 years old. The competitive juices are still flowing. Maybe I should come back. Because I do think, without having seen any corroboration of this, but I just have my sense is that the reason the Colts aren't going to claw back the signing bonus money that they could be owed under NFL labor agreements is because they might think, hey, he might actually come back. He might actually take a year or two off and say, I want to come back. And if that's the case, the fact that they've paid him that bonus money, there may be some legal or contractual ramifications that keep him tied there. And if not, at least a good faith effort would say, hey, if I'm coming back, I should come back with you guys. But as I'm saying that, Jerry, I'm thinking to myself, but the fans booed him off the field. The last place I'd want to go back, if I decide in a year or two or three to come back, the last place I'd go would be the place where those people booed me. So I was thinking that as I said that, and I still think it now, that and I've seen some one of the talk shows I was watching this week. I had not thought of this element of this, but if Andrew Luck was less reputable, if he had less morals and ethics to him, he could have said, you know what, I am undecided about my future, but let me spend this season rehabbing, and you guys keep paying me while I'm rehabbing. He could have made the 15 to 17 million, whatever it is he's owed, on top of that bonus money that he's already banked. He could have gotten paid. The contract would have been. He would have gotten paid to rehab this year. He could have easily done that. He didn't do that, and so I think that speaks to his character in an interesting way. That he could have gamed the system basically and walked away with even more money to help make his kids and grandkids and great-grandkids not have to work harder than they have to. So just more testament, I think, to his character that he didn't do that.
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that. Hey, the next one, and this is a small note here only because it just seemed odd to me, but David Glass bought the Kansas City Royals back in 2000. So he's been a long-time owner, and he's in the process of selling the team to a Kansas City native, John Sherman. Chris, he paid $96 million for the team in 2000. Okay? And he's getting ready to sell the team for $1 billion.
Yeah.
So I was thinking you and I could get together, pull our $96 million, and see if we could do the same thing. I'm just sitting there. It goes, now, I didn't break it down. I just read that story last night, and I didn't break it down to see what interest or percentage he was making on his money. So I'm thinking, okay, $96 million. For 19 years, you get to own a Major League Baseball team, which I have to think makes you a fan favorite at a cocktail party. And then, on your way out the door, I'd like to do my Austin Powers impersonation and say or Dr. Evil, $1 billion.
Yeah.
What is your take on that process? We talked about it. It's not the 2.3, for the Clippers or the Nets, but that's a Midwest small market baseball team.
Yeah.
And so if you're listening out there and you have $96 million and you're trying to get rich, there's hope for you. There's hope for you there.
Well, I mean, in 19 years, to more than 10, have your investment grow more than 10 times. People wonder about the health of baseball. This is the Royals selling for $1 billion. Of course, the Royals relatively recently they played in back-to-back World Series 2014, 2015, won in 2015. But yeah, now they're back to the basement. They cut budget to nothing. Now I think we see why they cut the budget back to nothing. It was in anticipation of a sale. So but lots of business owners, especially the big corporations, when they're getting ready to go on the market, they'll cut things to the bare bones. And so, 10 times your investment in 19 years. The only people that offer that kind of return are in prison. Their names are like Bernie Madoff, for example. So that's a pretty good return on investment there, to say the least.
Now, the other thing with the Luck story is everybody who has two quarterbacks in camp that are capable of playing in the NFL, the rumors have gone, oh, okay, well, so the first one that came out was the Giants are supposed to trade Eli Manning to the Colts. and so that Jones can play. Teddy Bridgewater is no longer going to back up Drew Brees. He's gonna go to the Colts, and I'm feeling a little bit sorry because it's one of our kids that's going to be quarterbacking the Colts. Percent from NC State, and it'll be interesting. He'll have an interesting year, but so Jones is going to start the final preseason game, and that's nothing more than we don't want Eli to get hurt in the last preseason game. Hey, Chris, I wanted to close out my part of this today with a really cool story from last night. Now, this is our last week in Vegas. We get to move back home on Sunday. So when we talk next week, I'll be back on the island. But I had to go up this week, had to fly up, and take care of some business that couldn't wait. So last night, after a crazy day of running errands, I get on a plane, hoping to take a nap. And it's a 2.5-hour flight. And what ended up happening was this young man sat down next to me on the plane. I say young man by comparison to me. I would say he's probably 35, 36 years old. And he's wearing a Derek Jeter jersey because he had just came from, I still want to call it Safeco, but I have to call it T-Mobile now. He had flown up from Vegas to see a 3-game set where the Yankees played. And the Yankees had a good deal of success there. They actually played really well, which they've been doing a lot of lately. And I'm going, okay, I'm just going to ask this guy how he became a Yankee fan, because I'm always intrigued by that. And it started with one question, and the conversation actually lasted for the entire 2.5 hours.
That's great.
And I've never done that on a plane where I just bumped into somebody. But his name was Bryant, and what was the neatest part about Bryant is Bryant grew up in New Jersey. And he grew up a Giants fan. He grew up a Devils fan. He grew up a Yankees fan. And here he is later on in life. Oh, and he'll tell you Rutgers and Seton Hall are the schools you pull for. And I'm going, I have finally found somebody who is, in my mind, my type of fan. As that you have loyalties to who your local teams are. Yeah. And you stick with them, you know. And again, you and I have had the conversation about the fan who pulls for North Carolina basketball and Virginia Tech football, and that's their right to do it. But I've always, now the difference for me is I've actually lived in 15 states, so I have a lot of local teams, if you will. But it was just refreshing to have a sports conversation with a fan who grew up in an area where he had his teams and he didn't trade them out for better teams because he liked Troy Aikman or he liked Joe Montana. And in the grand scheme of things, it turned what I was dreading as far as a plane ride into an awesome conversation that, again, you just don't run across a whole lot of. So now he was actually telling me he would listen to one of our podcasts, and whether he does that or not, I'm better for the conversation, and I say kudos to somebody who supported his local teams his whole life. Now he lives in Las Vegas, and he still supports his local teams back home. I just think that's a special kind of fan, and I wanted to take a second and say that's what made me smile this week. In addition, I thought the Scherzer thing was pretty awesome. When you think about how many times people end up on the DL and lose half the season, the fact that he's been able to pitch, and with all respect to Hershiser, when you were describing Scherzer, and I'm listening to you, I'm going, yeah, he's got that. I call it the Jordan thing, bulldog. Scherzer wants to win.
He just wants to win.
He wants to win. He wants to win. So that was my ending note. I'm excited for your trip off to Pittsburgh. I'll look forward to following that along, and I'm really hoping that we survive the game with the Crimson Tide.
Well, we have a lot to keep up with this weekend, and so we've done our part to get you ready. Well, and Jerry and I will come back on Labor Day. We're going to talk on Monday, and we'll wrap this weekend up, this busy weekend in sports, and we'll work some other things in as well. For Jerry Carter, Chris Graham signing off. Everyone have a great weekend.